Well, it was just a line item on a transportation department budget. The sale of the Idaho Transportation Department campus in Boise for nearly $52 million. But like that thread on a sweater that you can't help but notice is fraying, a raveling, if you will, some lawmakers gave that line item a tug and the whole thing began to unravel. The sale was blocked, the budget passed without it, the governor refused to sign it, but it became law anyway, and now a lawsuit has been filed. But the unraveling continues. We learned this week some key players who should have been told about court filings were not. And by key people, I mean two of the top leaders in Idaho's executive branch. The governor, the secretary of state, and the attorney general are three legs to the stool that is the state board of examiners. And now we're learning one of the legs of that three-legged stool has been removed from the legal process of the ITD lawsuit. Joe, you've been following this story for us. Governor Little says he was not made aware of some certain filings. We asked this yesterday that came from the paperwork or from the AG's office. We asked yesterday, were there any repercussions of this? Appears there are.
Yeah, there are repercussions, and we also asked the third leg of that stool about their involvement. So let's touch on all of this, Brian. So yes, to answer your question, it appears so. There are consequences. More paperwork filed with the Idaho Supreme Court, and it shows that there is new counsel representing ITD in the Department of Administration. More on that in a minute. Previously, though, it was the AG, Raul Labrador, representing all the respondents in the suit. And as Brian touched on, Governor Little's office tells me again today that they had no knowledge of the brief and the answer to the lawsuit that was filed on their behalf in the Idaho Supreme Court. So they're pushing back on the AG's statement that we shared with you yesterday that Governor Little was informed of the legal strategy for the Board of Examiners at least 1 week before the brief was due. Along with the Department of Administration and the Idaho Transportation Department, the Board of Examiners is one of the parties, respondents in this case. And so that board is Governor Brad Little, Attorney General Raul Labrador, and the Secretary of State, Phil McGrain. Those three are the Board of Examiners, and that board has the constitutional power to examine all claims against the state of Idaho, claims like the ITD suit. So I asked the Secretary of State's office if they were aware of the court filings and the content of it. They write to me in a quote, in an email, quote, as a member of the Board of Examiners, Secretary McGrain did not become aware of the suit until after the filing had been made. He is hopeful that the Board of Examiners will be removed from the suit going forward, end quote. So, did the Attorney General do state business on behalf of his clients without their knowledge? Governor and the Secretary of State seem to say yes. Attorney General, meanwhile, says that Governor Little knew that the deadline was coming and he didn't call a meeting to discuss. So we mentioned a change of counsel a minute ago. Attorney General Labrador is no longer the counsel for ITD or the Department of Administration. Governor Little signed a letter, this letter right behind me, hiring a local attorney, Joan Callahan, to represent those two agencies. And the letter says, quote, I have consulted with the Attorney General regarding the appointment of separate counsel. The AG remains counsel, though, for the Board of Examiners. So that is where we stand. We will see what happens from here, but it complicates the already complicated case. Of note, the Board of Examiners, all three of them, they're scheduled for a special meeting tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock to discuss this. It likely is executive session action, so we'll keep an eye on it. We'll let you know where it goes. But, Brian, the arguments in terms of this case, they were scheduled for sometime in August. We'll have to see what happens here. We know that the private group that thought they had bought the ITD campus, they're essentially asking the Supreme Court in one way or another, can you somehow block this legislation and make sure that the legislation that was blocking it does not cancel this sale, because the private group, Brian, they're still very much interested in acquiring that property on State Street.
It's a nice piece of property.
It's huge.
I can anticipate the questions coming in now. We pay the Attorney General and the lawyers in his office to defend the state in such cases. How much extra is this going to cost taxpayers to go outside of that?
We'll have to put in some public records requests. I can imagine that there's going to be a lot of time and effort put into this very complicated case. I went through dozens or hundreds of pages over the last few days going through this. So to answer the likely questions out there, Brian, this is going to cost taxpayers.
Extra. Exactly.
Extra.
All right. Thank you very much, Joe.